My name is Adam Martin. I am the founder of FI Project. I'm a 5-time felon, and I know what it feels like to be released from jail or a treatment center or detox or a homeless shelter into nothing. And so the idea was like, could we do a better job by providing services in an F5 fashion, which was the function key on a keyboard, which was like refresh. So like every time we met someone, what would it look like if we treated them like none of that existed?
So F5 Project is a nonprofit organization. We help people who have addiction issues, homelessness, mental health, and ultimately try and give them a chance to change.
I had seen some trends happening with peer support where people with like real lived experience, they were going back to where they came from and they were helping people out of those situations. There's no better way to get over the stuff that happened to you in your past than to go and help people who are currently experiencing it.
Hi, Cody. All right. Well, thank you everyone for having me here. As Adam said, my name is Cody and I am an alcoholic.
Cody.
Just so you know, I always give qualifiers whenever I'm speaking, so you know that I'm doing the deal as far as I'm concerned. I'm an alcoholic. I've been sober since the 30th of January 2005. I have a home group. It's the Northern Plains group. I have a sponsor. His name's Tom H. He lives up in Grand Forks. My sponsor has a sponsor. My sponsor's sponsor has a sponsor. I know him, so on and so forth, which when we get into my story, why sponsorship is so important, I'll explain that. I don't speak for any institution, AA or anything. So when I'm up here talking, it is my experience, it's my story, it's what I've done. So don't think that, because I've heard some really interesting speakers before where it's like, well, maybe not so much what you have, I want, but so I just want to throw that out there. So don't want that anything I say to accidentally paint AA with a negative brush. And so I'm a drunk. There's no denying the fact that I am an alcoholic. If you look at my family tree, if I was not born an alcoholic, I would have been the weird one in my family, because the whole tree is just nothing but drunks or raging codependents, the whole tree pretty much, all the way down. I've come from a long lineage, I guess, for lack of a better term, of males, especially the males in my family, who are all drunks. My dad's been sober a long time. All of his brothers were alcoholics. Some got sober, some didn't. I had a brother who was, flipped to the mom side. My mom isn't, but her dad, my grandpa was, all of his siblings, his parents, so my great-grandparents, it's everywhere. When I say that's can be important, it cannot be important, because I've also met people in this program who come from families where there's no one, where they're just like this anomaly of alcoholism that sprouts. So I knew from an early age that I was off. And what I mean by that is I never felt like I synced in or meshed in with the universe. Like just life itself. If I don't have a program of recovery in my life or booze in my system, existence just hurts. Like everything feels off. Like, because my thought, how my brain works is, while I'm talking with you, I'm also thinking about what I should have just said, because clearly what I said was wrong. I'm thinking about what I'm going to say and then what I'm going to say after that. Thinking about what I was saying to that person 10 minutes ago that I should have said differently. I'm going to be thinking about what's going on yesterday, what I'm going to do tomorrow, how I'm judging you at the same time you're judging me, how clearly at the exact same moment in time I know that I'm worse than you and better than you at the same moment in time. And everything I just laid out for you goes through my head in about a second, maybe 2 seconds if it's a slow day. So my brain, without booze or a program of recovery, is a very dangerous badlands sort of hellscape. When I discovered booze and I took that first drink, it calmed that down. All of a sudden, I just synced in with the universe. The tracking was right. Everything was right. I felt that one with everyone around me. It was great. It was truly magical, and the problem is though, for me, when I start drinking, usually around the third drink, sometimes it can happen right away, sometimes it's a little later, but a good rough average is around the third drink, I physically crave alcohol. Like I physically need alcohol at the same level that I need a breath of oxygen. The best way I can describe it is if you've ever been swimming and you're underwater for like that 1 or 2 seconds too long and you get that like primal urge to get air and you have to break the surface to get air. And when you do, you break through and you take that first deep breath of air. That's what I feel when alcohol has started reacting to my system. That same primal craving for booze is that same level as the need for oxygen, and that release that I get when I get it is that same level of that wonderful life inhaling breath, really. The problem is I just get thirstier and thirstier and thirstier because it's a craving that it's never satisfied by taking more, but it always tells me that more will satisfy it. I'm the type of person, even to this day, I'm the type of person, that let's say I'm reading a bottle of Tylenol and it says take 2 every 4 to 6 hours. My brain inverts those numbers and goes, I should take 4 to 6 every 2 hours. Just because if this does the X, then clearly more in a shorter time period will do something else. And obviously that's what I need. So I found booze, what was I, 16 when I drank for the first time. And I mean, before that, to get out of myself, like 7th grade art class was at Agassiz at the time. I was a kid in the corner in art class huffing glue because I realized, oh, this makes me feel better. So booze is my main problem. I identify as an alcoholic, but as we like to say, I can use anything alcoholically, whether it's relationships, money, job, you name anything that makes me feel good. I'll find a way to manipulate it and use it to get out of myself. So I drank from when I was 16 to 23. It was hard for me as a kid when I was still living at home to drink because I grew up in a house that was, as I said, my dad he hasn't drank since before I was born. And what's cool is, besides the fact that this treatment center is started by people that I know and I care about greatly, the name of this place, The Ridge, my dad grew up in the Golden Ridge neighborhood, literally just down, if you just go down 7th, just before the coulee or whatever, right there on 7th was his house he grew up in. And at that time, it was the absolute wrong side of town to grow up on. It was a very low class, blue collar sort of world that he grew up in. And that's sort of the environment that I grew up in, where it's just, there was no talking about feelings or how's your day or things like that. It was, you do what you need to do. If you don't, the one acceptable emotion, anger, is going to come out. So you better get your stuff done that you need to get done. So growing up with that, I didn't have a lot of opportunities because my dad told me at a very early age, he goes, if you're ever stupid enough to get caught, thrown into jail, don't call me because I will work with the police to make sure that you stay in jail longer. Like that's the environment I grew up in. Like it was very clear that if I ever got caught or in trouble, he would make it his mission to make it even worse for me. So finally I moved out. It was great. I was free. I could drink. I was going to NDSU. I hid out in college for a really long time, just because it's a great way to avoid the real world. I decided in 2003 that clearly those people around me that I was drinking with, they were the problem, so I needed to do a geographical. And for me, I do nothing halfway. If I do anything, it's all in, 100%, doing it all the way. So in 2003, I moved to Spain for 3 months, and it was scary how easy it was to go to the financial aid office at NDSU and just be like, I need money. And they're like, okay. And all of a sudden just poof, student loans wound up in my bank account. And yeah, I just burned through so much money just drinking, because I discovered that no matter where I go, I'm there and I'm the problem. That is a bitch to discover when you're 21 years old, that it doesn't matter who you're around. So kept drinking. My last year of drinking, every time I went out, yeah, every time I went out my last year of drinking, I think maybe once, maybe, it was blackout. Like, it wasn't a matter of if I was going to black out. It became a game of, let's see how we can push the blackout later into the night. Because it wasn't uncommon to enter the world of a blackout around 9 p.m. and wake up the next morning somewhere. Always enjoyed, I don't want to say enjoyed, found it interesting of waking up out of a blackout and playing the game of where the hell's my car this morning. Kind of hoped it wouldn't be in my garage in my apartment, because that means that I drove just annihilatedly drunk, but it wound up there a lot of the times, trying to piece together what I did the night before. And then till finally in January of 2005, I just turned 23. Things like my eyes, when I would look in the mirror, my eyes were starting to not look white anymore. There was sort of funky yellowish, grayish thing going on. I was popping Pepto-Bismol like Tic Tacs, because my insides, just from the amount of booze I was putting in, I could just feel wrecked on the inside. So Pepto-Bismol was a regular. End of the January 2005, I was like, clearly, again, even though I hadn't learned my lesson, it's got to be the people I'm around. So I'm like, maybe I just need to get out of town for the weekend, go down to the cities. My buddy lived down, and his girlfriend, now wife, lived down there. Drink around them. That'll somehow be different. The last drink I ever remember drinking, I'm sure it wasn't my last, but the last one I ever remember drinking was served in a fishbowl at some bar in downtown Minneapolis. Usually that's designed for a group of people. That was just mine, and I wasn't sharing. And it was finally like, I was just happy that they gave me a drink that was the appropriate size. And that's when I entered the blackout for the evening. I came to the next morning, floor of my buddy's apartment. I couldn't walk because I was so dehydrated. My legs were cramped up, so I couldn't move my legs. So I army crawled down the hallway to the bathroom, puked up blood. My knuckles were I punched something or someone that, I don't know, but my knuckles were all beat up and crusted with blood and scraped. So something happened. And I just knew that something had to change. Like, the big book in AA describes them as kind of moments of clarity, where I just knew very clearly that, okay, you can keep doing what you're doing, and you will either kill yourself or someone else. Like, the odds were such, the amount of dumb stuff that I was doing, the driving drunk, all that stuff. It was just a matter of time until someone got severely hurt. And my thought process was, or you could just go to your old man and ask him for help. So driving back to Fargo, I went to my parents' house and I just asked my dad, when did you know you had a problem drinking? He paused for a moment. He thought about it. And he goes, well, you got to ask yourself this question. When you take a drink of alcohol, do you know what's going to happen? Yes or no? And when I drink, I don't know what's going to happen. I've since been around non-alcoholic people who, and this blows my mind, they'll be drinking, they'll be like on their second glass of wine, and they'll be like, whew, feeling warm. I'm gonna have a glass of water next. Why in the hell would you have a glass of water at that point in time? Like, the fun is just starting. Like, why would you ruin a buzz by, like, I just don't get that. Like, it makes no sense to me at all why a human being would do that. Yet non-alcoholic people, 90% of the population, that's what they do. And I don't get why he would do that. So he reached under the coffee table, handed me a copy of the big book he had, which is still my primary one that I have here, gave me a list of meetings in Fargo This was a Sunday when I went there. It was after 9, so there was no other meetings, and just told me to go to a meeting the next day. It was 5:30, and that was it. Because he knew that because I was his kid, it would be hard to not possible for him to like. There was too much emotional connection from there. He needed the fellowship program of AA to help me and to get me to get sober. So I went to my first meeting. They were doing it was an open speaker birthday meeting, so you didn't have to share. So I snuck in, sat in the back, and just listened to what they had to say. And the speaker, she shared about the feelings of not feeling up, of not measuring up, of having that hole inside of her. She shared about what happens when she drinks. And what I've described so far, what we talk about in AA, is the root cause of alcoholism is a twofold disease. It's the phenomenon of craving and the obsession of the mind. The phenomenon of craving is what I talked about when I ingest booze and I physically need to have it. And I crave it. My fingertips will itch for booze. Like I need to have it. The other part is the obsession of the mind, which, AA, I know I've seen so many people go back out after long-term sobriety that I know that even after 17 years, if I went back out, my phenomenon of craving would kick in immediately and I would be off to the races. So what the program of recovery does is it gets rid of the obsession of the mind. It doesn't allow me to take that first drink. And that obsession, man, and early sobriety, that stuck with me for a long time. My first year and a half, I was still mentally itching for that first drink a lot of times. Like I just thought about it. It was like, God, I want to drink. I would love a booze. I would love a double short Jack Coke right now. Like a Budweiser would be great. Some shots of tequila, something would be amazing, And how I got through that is I found a good home group. I got a sponsor who took me through the 12 steps. And I kept going to meetings. I mean, in early sobriety, I think in my first year and a half of sobriety, I was averaging 5 to 9 meetings a week, just because, you have to relearn. I had to relearn how to live without booze. Like, where do you go on a Friday if you're not drinking? Like, how do you hang out with people if you're not using alcohol? Like, how do you go shopping? Grocery shopping, because my first stop was always my apartment was by Happy Harry's on 45th Street. So it was like I went there so often that the people working there, you'd start getting the hey, how's it going head nod when you came in because they saw me so often. So it's like, how do I go shopping? Who do I hang out with? What do I do for fun? How do I relax? How do I play video games without having a drink next to me? I didn't know how to live without alcohol. So I had to find something else to occupy my time. And that was just going to a lot of meetings, hanging out with other people who were trying to live life without booze and just stay sober one day at a time. And I did that for that first year and a half. I got a sponsor. If you're wondering, a sponsor there's a lot of misconceptions about sponsorship where you think, oh, they're your boss or they tell you what to do or they lecture. And for me, how I understand sponsorship is just a closed-mouthed friend, basically. It's someone who can keep their mouth shut. They have a little bit more experience working the steps than you. They usually kind of similar temperaments, similar life stories that can just kind of give you a side-by-side walk with you through recovery. They don't do it for you. They don't drag you along. They stand beside you and walk with you through the really hard times and the trials in life. And I did all the 12 steps under sponsorship guidance. None of them, now that I've been through them multiple times, there's nothing to be afraid of in the steps that I've found. There's nothing that freaks me out about them anymore. And the best thing I can say is if you're worrying about them, don't, because they're in order for a reason. for example, so many people come in and they like look at the amend step and they freak out, or they look at the inventory steps and they go, oh my God, and it's like, whoa, wait a minute. If you're just meeting with your sponsor and you're only on step 1 or 2, don't project into the future and freak out about 4, 9, or 10 or whatever, because you're not there yet. It's my experience that if you're just doing it under sponsorship guidance to the best of your ability, it's not going to be perfect. When you get to, for example, when you get to 5 or you get to 9, the amend step, if you've done the previous steps to the best of your ability, you'll be okay. And the God thing really spun me for a loop, because when I came in, I think kind of the only way to describe me is borderline militant atheist, I think, because one, how dare you insinuate that I need anything, because don't you know who I am? And 2, everything that you're trying to shove down my throat is complete BS. My mom, when I was a kid, had me go to church and confirmation. Like, she was like, looking back now, I see she was trying to instill things like morals and codes of ethics and decency and all that stuff in me, but that was just not how I'm wired. And the thing about AA and all 12-step programs really is their concept of whatever higher power is can be as broad as encompassing as you can think of. For example, I have my sponsor who's also a really good friend of mine. He's been sober for 33 years or something. Awesome program. If you ask him what his conception of a higher power is, he'll tell you he is an atheist and believes the program is a practice, it's an action, but he doesn't believe in a Western concept of a higher power. But then you go to the other end of the spectrum, and a guy that I sponsor right now spent 1.5 years in seminary before he discerned out of it, knows way more about the Catholic faith than most priests that I've talked with. And yet those 2 people can be part of the same program, because the higher power aspect of when you're turning it over can literally be anything at all, as long as it's not you. And for me, I can speak from my experience. That's the hiccup, is it's not me. I have to get it out of myself, So I was living life on life's terms. I sobered up here in Fargo. I moved to Grand Forks at about 7.5 years of sobriety. I moved up there because part of as I said, I can get addicted to anything. I was addicted, this is weird as shit, but I was addicted to basically hiding from the real world in college, essentially, for a long time. Moved up to Grand Forks for more schooling, burned out of that after 3 more years. It was just living life, and then I hit. My story, I think, is one that shows that no matter how long you've been sober, life still happens. And why that's important to understand is a lot of the times, if you hear some speakers, not all, but sometimes when you hear speakers, they give you this sort of canned speech. They got sober, and at like 2 years, they met her or him. Then they got a job at like 3 years. And then they had the 2.5 kids. And then they had the 2-stall garage. And then they had the house. And then they get the white picket fence. And every time they walk out their front doors, it's just sunshines and rainbows. And they're just free of everything. And it's blah, blah, blah. And I just want to puke when I hear that crap, because that's not life. Because when you sober up, the thing is, and the part that trips a lot of people up, is life still happens when you're sober. Like, good stuff will happen when you're sober. Bad stuff will happen when you're sober. And sobriety is about facing those challenges and overcoming those obstacles and moving beyond them sober, which is a pain, because when you go through those things, I don't know about you, but I feel a lot. And when I feel a lot, it takes a lot for me to get through those feelings sober. So in December of 2020, we had the pandemic. My whole career, I at that time, I'd been working for a nonprofit in Grand Forks, working with disabled adults. Pandemic just nuked that whole thing, because everyone stayed home, especially disabled adults, very, at-risk population. So they stayed at home. So on unemployment, which for me was a mind trip, because growing up, as I said, in the world I grew up in, There's a kind of world where no matter what, you get your work done. Like that's just how it is. So for me, all of a sudden be on unemployment, have a career change, lose job, all that against my will threw me for a loop. So then I went through all that change, found a different job in December of 2020. Uh, I'm a big animal lover, so an old elderly cat that I'd adopted at 8, he was 18 when I adopted it, put him down in March of 2020. Where are we at with timeline here? 21. Then in May of 2021, I was at my job just thinking, okay, things are going to settle down now, going to get calmer. My phone rings and it says mom's cell, which is odd because my mom, I kind of call her kind of a wannabe millennial with her texting and her smartphone and stuff. So she texts me all the time, but rarely calls me during the day. So I knew she was calling me during the workday that something real was going on. So I picked it up and I'm like, hey mom, what's up? Your brother Jerry's dead. We just got a call from Denver that they found him and he finally died. To give you a little background, my brother was 13 years older than me, and why there was the age difference, he was from my dad's first marriage. He was the type of person that knew he was an alcoholic and kept drinking anyway. There's this sort of myth that exists out there that if alcoholics could just be strong-willed enough or stubborn enough or make up their mind enough or tough enough that they could somehow stay sober. And I'll tell you right now that my brother Jerry, if that was true, he would still be alive because he was the type of person where he blew his knee out one time and over the phone we're like, you should go to the doctor. And his response was, screw that. People were blowing knees out before doctors. I don't need a doctor. So he just pushed through it. He was walking his bike through a park one time and 4 guys said, hey, give us your bike. Well, no one told him what to do, so they broke a skateboard over his head and he woke up in the hospital bleeding out of his ear. And the doctor's like, I don't know how you're alive, let alone up and around and walking. Blind in one eye. He was a white guy, blonde hair, blue eyes, but he got a job as a bouncer at a Mexican cowboy bar in Denver because it was fun, because he was then legally able to beat people up because he was the bouncer. Like, this was the type of person that he was. And alcoholism killed him. The great obsession and what a lot of drunks try and do is the one thing that I've seen alcoholics go back out is they somehow convince themselves that they can do it this time, that it'll be different this time, that they can control it this time. And my brother was one of those people. And I'm just going to read this little paragraph here that describes what the end result is of self-will and alcoholism if you think you can control it yourself. I'll just read this here. This 52-year-old male was homeless, lived in his inoperable van that was parked in the corner of a dirt lot. He was last known alive May 4th, 2021 at 1700 hours, at which time he was described as having alcohol withdrawal and was very shaky. He was found unresponsive, lying face down in the dirt lot on May 5th, 2021 at 6:31 hours. His medical history included blindness in his right eye due to high pressure, and his social history included 20 plus years of alcohol abuse, occasional marijuana use, and remote methamphetamine use. That is the circumstances of death for my brother's autopsy report, and contributing factor was ethanol withdrawal. Basically, he was in the routine where he would be homeless, living in a dirt lot with his inoperable van, just getting drunk all the time, and then he would sober up by himself, spin dry alone to get into a facility somewhere for a few weeks to get a roof over his head, get them 3 meals a day, basically build up enough strength, and then he would go back to it. That was his cycle. That's what he did. And finally, basically, he was found face down. He had a massive heart attack because they found him in the dirt lot. That's the end result of alcoholism. Back out. That is probably where I would end up because we were very much alike in our temperament, disposition, and things like that. So I got through that. Then in September, so June, July, August, so 4 months later, I then made the decision to divorce my wife due to a whole lot of circumstances. So now let's just put a nuke in my whole existence. Everything is going to change now. Where everything changed, and it was a choice that I made, but it was something that I had to make in response to a bunch of actions that were taken outside of my control. From September until January, I called my sponsor and my sponsor, who also my best friend, every single day, because if I didn't jump all into the program and recovery, I was going to drink. Like, just when you have that much emotion, that much stuff going on, that much life going on, the emotions are so intense for me that I don't know how to react without either a strong drink in my hand or a strong program. That's just where I'm at. So I made it through that, through being super involved in the program, working with a whole bunch of other guys, going to meetings. My home group in Grand Forks met on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays, and I went every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday, and just got honest about what was going on. Here I was at 16 years of sobriety, and there was a few times I went to a meeting, and I just cried at a meeting because shit, I just needed to cry. Like, there's just days where it's like, I just need to go to a meeting, puke on the table, what's going on, cry. And the wonderful thing about the program is no one judged you or judged me around that table, because they knew what I was going through and that it was fine. Life was going good. I went on, because I'd been smart and because I'm partially a cheap ass, I was able to go on a great vacation in January that year because of living the program in my life. So I was like, okay, things will be calm. We'll get through this. Then in March of 22, so March of this year, a member of our home group, who's kind of like the elder statesman of the group, he just hit his 50-year sobriety birthday, shot me a text and one day and goes, hey, I don't know if you've heard, but Jason died. Jason was a guy that I sponsored. So I called up my buddy and was like, hey, what the heck going on? And apparently Jason had moved from Fargo from Grand Forks. He wasn't going to meetings. He wasn't doing anything. I was trying to at least throw out the lifeline every now and again through text. About 2 weeks before that, he'd stop responding. So best case scenario, I hope that he'd just been drinking. But finally, I guess his demons got the best of him, and he killed himself because he just couldn't get honest with himself, So that was a trip. And he's had this, his cycle was he'd be sober for a while, get drunk, and then go to treatment, say that he just needs to focus on his mental health, and that was it. Didn't work the steps, didn't work a program, didn't do anything. And finally they got the better of him. So I sort of lay out this cluster of like a 15-month time period to show that you can get through anything in sobriety. It'll happen at any stage in your sobriety. Life is still going to happen no matter what. Like, it's going to happen. But you can get through it principled, without hurting people, working a program, and in a way that allows it so you don't have to cause any more damage in your life, because I did that through all of that, and miracle made it through my divorce without having to make any huge amends to anyone. And then life changed through another curve, a fun curveball this time, where an opportunity arose for me to get a job down here at F5 and working with Adam. I was like, all right, universe, that's what you want. Here we go. So once again, made the move, made the change, and this is where I'm at. And the thing is about sobriety is if you screw up, it's okay. I've screwed up many times in sobriety. When I was about a year and a half to 2 years sober, I was probably one of the orneriest, driest drunks you've ever met, where the only thing I was doing right was going to meetings. Everything else was a dumpster fire in my life, but I was still going to meetings. And as we like to say in AA is we don't shoot our wounded. It doesn't matter how much you might have screwed up, how much you're hurting. If you've gone back out 15 times and come back 16, AA will still always be there and care for you and help you through that stuff in your life. But today, I know that if I was to drink, part of the reason why I stay sometimes when I'm like in a dark moment is I don't know if my ego would allow me to come back. I really don't. I honestly don't. I know I have an infinite number of drunks in me. I mean, I'm an alcoholic. Drinking for me is like swimming for a fish. It's my natural state and condition. Recovery, though, is unnatural for me. So I don't know if I was to go back out, if I would be able to get over myself and walk back through those doors and humble myself and be like, yeah, I screwed up, got to start over, So whenever I'm working with someone who's sort of gone out and come back in, or if someone, raises their hand at a meeting because they're in their first 30 days of sobriety or whatever, or if they've had the courage to say that, I went back out and screwed up, I always, one, try and make them feel welcome, and two, listen to their stories, because those are the people that help me so much, because they remind me of what it is out there. My scars of drinking have faded a little bit. They've healed a little bit. So it's really easy for my mind after so long to start saying, was it really that bad? Maybe, 23, you were overreacting. I mean, come on, you're only 23, maybe it'll be different all these just BS stories, so hearing the people when they come back in helps me stay sober and helps me stay where I'm at in my sobriety, so and today life is great. I have a sponsor. I got a home group. I'm trying to work this thing one day at a time. And overall, the progress is 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, where there are those back step days, but overall, it is getting better. So, so that's what I am. That's me. That's my story. And that's about all I got. So thank you.
My name is Adam Martin. I am the founder of F5 Project. I'm a 5-time felon, and I know what it feels like to be released from jail or a treatment center or detox or a homeless shelter into nothing. And so the idea was could we do a better job by providing services in an F5 fashion, which was the function key on a keyboard, which was refresh. So every time we met someone, what would it look like if we treated them like none of that existed?
So F5 Project is a nonprofit organization. We help people who have addiction issues, homelessness, mental health, and ultimately try and give them a chance to change.
I had seen some trends happening with peer support where people with real lived experience, they were going back to where they came from and they were helping people out of those situations. There's no better way to get over the stuff that happened to you in your past than to go and help people who are currently experiencing it.